You just spent $30, $40, maybe $50,000 on a brand new outboard. You're at the ramp. The water is flat. The cowling hasn't even seen its first scratch. And someone at the marina is already telling you to just nail it. That break-in is a myth manufacturers invented to protect themselves. Here's the problem. That advice could permanently limit what your engine is capable of for the rest of its life. And your ECU, it's watching and recording everything you do during those first 10 hours. Why everyone at the ramp has a different answer. Ask 6 boaters how to break in a new outboard, and you'll hear 6 different theories. One says idle it for 2 hours at the dock. Another says run it like you stole it, hard from the start, because that's how race engines are broken in. A third says modern manufacturing tolerances are so tight that break-in is basically irrelevant. And your dealer told you to follow the owner's manual and change the oil at 20 hours. Here's the frustrating truth. Some of those people aren't entirely wrong. And that's exactly why the break-in question keeps generating arguments that never get resolved. The real answer is grounded in physics and metallurgy. And once you understand what is actually happening inside a new engine during those first 10 hours, the right approach becomes obvious. So let's start there. What's actually happening inside a new engine? When your outboard comes out of the factory, it has been precision machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The cylinder bores have been honed with a crosshatch pattern, a deliberate diamond scoring on the cylinder wall surface designed to hold an oil film between the piston rings and the wall. The piston rings themselves have been precision fitted to those bores. But here's what the manufacturing process cannot do. It cannot create the perfect seal between ring and cylinder wall that your engine needs to make maximum compression and run at its best efficiency. That seal has to be created by the engine itself through a controlled process of microscopic wear during early operation. What you're actually doing during break-in is allowing the piston rings to wear against those honed cylinder walls under the right conditions. Enough combustion pressure to push the rings firmly against the wall and flatten the microscopic peaks in the crosshatch pattern, but not so much sustained heat and load that the oil film between ring and wall breaks down before the seating is complete. When this process goes right, the result is a tight, efficient seal that locks combustion pressure into the cylinder where it belongs, keeps oil out of the combustion chamber, and delivers the full compression the engine was designed to produce. When it goes wrong, in either direction, the consequences follow your engine for the rest of its life. The 2 ways break-in fails. There are exactly 2 ways to get this wrong, and both of them are common. Understanding both is the key to understanding why the manufacturer's specific procedure isn't just paperwork. Failure mode 1. The dock idler. This is the boater who ties the engine to the dock, puts it in gear, and runs it at 800 to 1,000 revolutions per minute for a couple of hours because he's being careful. It feels responsible. It's actually the worst thing you can do. At idle, combustion pressure is minimal. The piston rings aren't being pushed firmly against the cylinder walls with enough force to properly seat against the crosshatch. Instead, the rings are running loosely in the bore, and the heat and friction of that early running period is polishing the cylinder walls rather than wearing them in. The technical term for what happens is cylinder wall glazing. The honed crosshatch pattern gets filled in with burnt oil residue and wear particles, creating a mirror-smooth surface. And a mirror-smooth cylinder wall cannot hold an oil film. Once a cylinder wall is glazed, the rings never seat properly. The only fix is to disassemble the engine, rehone the cylinders, and repeat the break-in process, an expensive proposition on a brand new motor. In practice, most owners never identify the real problem. They just end up with an engine that makes oil, runs a little rich, never quite hits its top speed numbers, and burns through oil at a rate that seems almost normal until a mechanic eventually finds the fouled plugs and the telltale signs of ring blow by. This is what 4-stroke outboard owners call making oil, and improper break-in specifically too much idling and too little load during the critical first hours, is one of the primary causes. In a 4-stroke outboard, when the piston rings don't seal properly, small amounts of unburned fuel and combustion gases blow past the rings into the crankcase, contaminating the oil. Pull the dipstick and the oil level is rising instead of falling. That's fuel and combustion gases in your crankcase. It's not a minor issue. It compromises lubrication for every component in the engine and, left unaddressed, accelerates wear throughout. Failure mode 2. The wide-open throttle believer. This is the boater who heard that race engines are broken in at high RPM and applied that logic to his $40,000 fishing outboard. Pin it from the start, sustained WOT, let the rings seat under maximum combustion pressure. Here's the problem. At maximum load on a brand new engine, combustion temperatures spike. The oil film between ring and cylinder wall, which is what prevents metal-to-metal contact during the seating process, can break down faster than the rings can seat properly. What you get instead of controlled wear-in is scuffing, direct metal contact between ring and bore that creates irregular wear patterns, hot spots, and damage that no amount of subsequent careful operation can undo. The race engine argument isn't wrong in principle. High load does promote ring seating, but race engines are typically rebuilt between seasons by trained mechanics who hone cylinders to exact specifications, use specific break-in oils formulated without friction modifiers, and perform controlled dyno break-in runs with precise cool-down cycles between each load interval. That is not what happens at a boat ramp with a production outboard and a full tank of E10. The sweet spot, what both engine physics and manufacturer engineering point toward, is moderate, variable load. Enough combustion pressure to push the rings against the wall. Enough variation in RPM and load to ensure the rings seat evenly across the full bore diameter, and enough restraint to ensure the oil film stays intact throughout the process. What the manufacturers actually say. Here's where things get specific and where the ramp-side debates get settled. Because Yamaha, Mercury, and Suzuki have all published detailed break-in procedures, and they're consistent enough that the core pattern is clear. Yamaha's 4-stroke break-in procedure runs across 10 hours. The first hour, operate at varying speeds, but don't exceed 2,000 revolutions per minute or approximately half throttle. Keep the revolutions per minute moving. Don't lock it at one setting. The second hour, increase the limit. Bring the boat up to a comfortable planing speed, then back the throttle down while keeping the hull on plane. The objective is getting the engine under a real load, hull resistance, not just spinning a prop in air. Hours 3 through 10, you can operate at any speed, including WOT, but don't hold wide open throttle for more than 5 minutes at a stretch. Vary the RPM, bring it up, ease it back, let it breathe, push it again. After 10 hours, normal operation, change the oil. Mercury's procedure is very similar, varied throttle settings up to 4,500 revolutions per minute for the first 2 hours. Then normal operation, but without sustained WOT beyond 5 minutes for the remaining 8 hours. Suzuki adds an initial idle-in-gear period of approximately 15 minutes before beginning the progressive RPM stages, giving the oil circulation system time to fully prime before load is applied. The pattern across all three is the same. Start conservative, build progressively, vary constantly, avoid sustained maximum load until the rings have had time to seat. 2 things these procedures have in common are worth noting. First, they all require the engine to be in the water, under load, with a propeller installed. Breaking in an outboard on a flush kit at the dock does not create the resistance and load conditions the rings need to seat. It's the aquatic equivalent of the dock idler. Same glazing risk, same outcome. Second, they all specifically call for varying RPM rather than holding a constant speed. The reason is that the piston rings seat at different contact points as RPM changes, ensuring even wear around the full circumference of the bore. The ECU is watching, and so is your warranty. Here's the part of this story that catches most boaters completely off guard, and it's why the break-in question is more serious than a debate about best practice. Modern outboard ECUs, the engine control units on Yamaha, Mercury, Suzuki, and virtually every other current four-stroke outboard, record operating history in 1,000 RPM increments. When you bring a warranty claim to a dealer and they plug in a diagnostic tool, they can see exactly how many hours your engine spent at each RPM band across its life. Not just the total hours, the RPM distribution. How long it spent at idle, how long it spent at cruise, how long it was hammered at WOT, and when that time at WOT occurred. This is documented and verifiable. A Yamaha diagnostic download will show that a given engine spent 8 hours in the first 10 hours of its life, above 5,500 revolutions per minute. A Mercury diagnostic tool will show that the engine spent its entire first 2 hours below 1,000 revolutions per minute, dock idling while the owner thought he was being responsible. The computer tells the story whether or not the owner remembers what they did. Yamaha's published warranty language is explicit. Operation of a motor at RPM outside the specified range during break-in is classified as abuse and can exclude warranty coverage. One documented case from a popular boating forum. A new Yamaha motor revealed 5,775 revolutions per minute at under 1 hour of use on its first diagnostic download, exceeding the motor's specified maximum. Yamaha's position was that the break-in had been compromised and any failures relating to that abuse would not be covered. The reason dealers download the ECU history before performing warranty work is precisely because the engine's own record can confirm or contradict what the owner reports. If your rings don't seat properly and the engine starts making oil at 300 hours, and the ECU shows the first 10 hours were all below 1,500 RP, your warranty claim just got significantly more complicated. This isn't a manufacturer trick. It's how they verify that a $40,000 engine failure wasn't caused by operator error during the critical window when the engine was most vulnerable. The prop problem nobody mentions. There's one more break-in pitfall that almost never gets discussed, but causes genuine problems: the wrong propeller. Most new boats come from the factory slightly overpropped, fitted with a pitch that's optimized for the boat lightly loaded with minimal fuel and 2 people aboard. This is fine for a sea trial. It's a problem during break-in. When a boat is overpropped, the engine has to work harder to get the hull onto plane. During the break-in period, when you're specifically trying to avoid overloading the engine, an overpropped setup puts the engine under more strain than necessary to maintain the target RPM range. It also means the engine may be lugging at RPMs where it's not making power efficiently, which is almost as bad as idling for ring seating purposes. If your new motor won't reach its specified WOT RPM range, typically 5,500 to 6,000 RPM for most modern 4-strokes, with a reasonable load on a calm day, the prop pitch is too high for that application. Raise this with your dealer before you complete your break-in. A 1 pitch drop in propeller pitch typically translates to roughly 150 to 200 additional RPM at WOT. Getting the prop right during break-in means the engine loads and unloads cleanly at every stage of the process, and you'll have accurate baseline performance numbers to compare against as the engine accumulates hours. The 20-hour service, the most important oil change of your engine's life. 10 hours of break-in done, rings seated, engine running clean. Now what? The answer is the 20-hour service, often also called the break-in service, and it's the most critical maintenance event in the engine's entire life. Here's why. During break-in, as the rings seat against the cylinder walls and the engine's other contact surfaces wear into their final geometry, microscopic metal particles are shed into the oil. This is normal and expected. The crosshatch peaks being worn down by the rings don't just disappear. They go somewhere, and that somewhere is the crankcase oil. The break-in oil becomes laden with fine metallic particles that, if left circulating, will accelerate wear on every bearing surface, every journal, every surface the oil touches. The 20-hour service drains that contaminated oil and replaces it with fresh oil. Clean oil that isn't carrying the byproducts of the seating process through critical clearances. Most manufacturers also specify changing the lower unit gear lube at this service. For similar reasons, the gear break-in process produces fine particles that need to be flushed out before they cause wear in the gear case. Miss this service, or delay it significantly, and you're running a broken-in engine on oil that's been carrying metal particles since hour 1. The engine won't fail immediately, but the cumulative bearing wear from those particles circulating through the system will show up eventually, and your engine's service life will be shorter than it should have been, from a cause that cost you nothing to prevent. The 20-hour service is also when your dealer can do a first comprehensive check of the engine's health. Valve clearances, fuel system function, electrical connections, and a diagnostic download that gives you a clean baseline for everything that follows. The practical breakdown. Here's what all of this means for your first 10 hours. Do it in the water, under load, with the correct prop. Not on a flush kit, not at the dock. Out on the water where hull resistance creates the load the rings need to seat against. Vary your RPM constantly. Pick a cruising speed and change it every 5 to 10 minutes throughout the break-in period. The rings need to seat at multiple contact points around the bore circumference, and that only happens with varying RPM and load. Follow your specific manufacturer's schedule. The Yamaha procedure is not the same as the Mercury procedure. The Suzuki procedure adds an initial idle phase the others don't. Your owner's manual has the procedure for your exact engine. Use it because that's what the warranty is written against. Avoid sustained WOT in hours 1 and 2 entirely. Brief excursions to plane the boat are acceptable and expected. Sustained full throttle operation before the first 2 hours are complete is not. Don't idle. Especially don't idle for long periods. The dock idle approach feels careful and responsible. It is the single most reliable path to glazed cylinders and an engine that makes oil for the rest of its service life. Do the 20-hour service on time. This is not optional maintenance, it's the final step of the break-in process. Budget for it when you budget for the new engine. The bottom line. The shocking truth about breaking in a new outboard isn't that break-in is unnecessary. It's that the two most common approaches boaters take are both wrong in different directions, and the consequences of getting it wrong are permanent. The dock idler glazes his cylinders and spends the next 3 years dealing with an engine that makes oil and never quite hits its top speed numbers without ever knowing why. The wide-open believer scuffs his bores in the first hour and wonders why his engine burns oil and runs a little rough, attributing it to anything other than what actually happened. The boater who follows the manufacturer's progressive, variable throttle procedure, does it under real load in real water, changes the oil at 20 hours, and moves on, that boater gets an engine that performs at its designed ceiling for its full designed service life. 10 hours, that's the investment, and your engine's ECU is recording every single one of them. Subscribe for more honest content that gets into the real science of what keeps your engine running right. And drop a comment. We want to hear how you broke in your last engine and whether you'd do anything differently.